All right, here we go again. Another edition of the All 32 Pod. Mike Giardi, Will Parkinson alongside. As always, excited to do this show. One football game. There was one football game last night, so we had our eyes glued on that, Will. And, I think there's a lot of stuff being said about it that we're going to get into shortly. But just quick impressions on the Patriots and Eagles last night.
Yeah, look, we got another football game. We are into week 2/week 3, however you want to phrase it. And we've week zeros these days, but it's good to see more football. I know there's some weather concerns. We talked a lot about Drake Maye the last couple of weeks, and it was nice to be able to see Drake Maye play some football. We got Kenny Pickett and Drake Maye going at it. But no, it was awesome to have another football game, and we're into a loaded weekend. Some trades, some signings, and a loaded weekend of preseason games as we get closer and closer to the regular season here.
A reminder, the show brought to you by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. And Game Time, best tickets, best prices to get you in to see any event that you want to see, maybe even like a concert. We talk about games all the time, but, I like my music. You like to do that as well. So use them because they are the best. I use them, Will uses them, and I have absolutely zero complaints, as I'm sure you don't either. We talk about May. Let's get into it because we sat here last week and I said to you, I can't believe they did what they did with him. I can't believe they only played him 6 snaps. And this was, quote unquote, part of the plan. We have a plan for all our quarterbacks. And to me, as Drake has just sort of kind of been treading water, stuck in the mud, however you want to say it, during this 2-week period of training camp, I'm like, he's 21 years old. He needs to play. And when we're watching him in camp, a lot of times you're seeing him look too mechanical, too robotic. They're trying to change too many things. You still saw those things come into play in the game on Thursday night against Philly, Will. But what you also saw was, lo and behold, a guy who was able to cut it loose a little bit and turn into the playmaker that he was at North Carolina. And whether it was his first run, which again, he maybe bailed out of the pocket too soon, but he turned it into a positive 6-yard gain. He got the hit under his belt. Then there was a nice action play where Nolan Smith is in his face. He flips his hips, and it's just a really athletic. You're not thinking about it. You just got to get rid of the ball. And he looked like the Drake Maye I saw in college. And then, of course, the deep ball to Javon Baker, where it wasn't just the 54 yards in the air the throw went, and Baker, unfortunately, couldn't control the catch when he hit the ground, but he should have. It was a perfectly thrown ball, but it was sensing pressure up the gut, sliding to his left, keeping his eyes down the field, real quarterback stuff, real stuff that you said, oh, in case you were wondering, that's why Drake Maye was drafted number 3 overall.
Yeah, I just think the biggest thing, for me, and we talked a lot about this, was, okay, if the strategy was what it was week 1, and again, we want to take this guy along slowly, he's a project, we don't want to jump to conclusions, X, Y, and Z. That's great. Now, preseason is the time to kind of get some of the mistakes out, the joint practices. Obviously, we talked about it, the joint practice against Philly, not pretty from an offensive perspective. Drake Maye, the offensive line, receivers, X, Y, and Z, but to really get him out there, get a couple series under his belt, let him throw the ball, I believe, 9 times, in total. As you mentioned, a
11
throwaways.
11 attempts and 9 real throws because 2 of them were throwaways.
But obviously it's the one big throw that we, everyone's going to come back to, and there's the arm strength, there's things like that. I thought the footwork looked good in a couple of different drop backs, as you mentioned. I just think it was nice to be able to go out there and see him play. Again, it's preseason, it's backups versus backups, and young guys and whatever. To me, though, like, these are reps that are going to be super important for him, and be able to get there in game action, guys flying at you, and kind of see how you adjust. Do I want to jump to conclusions and say all of a sudden there's a quarterback controversy, and now Drake Maye's going to start week 1? I don't think I'm anywhere near there, but the Patriots were leading every national debate show, and and our buddy Greg Bedard's comments were all over first things first and all these different places of, oh my God, this team is a disaster, and quarterback's a mess and all that stuff, and now it's like, now he's the savior again and all that stuff. I think there's obviously somewhere in the middle. I just go back to, again, reps, seeing him do some of the things that are special. I always come back to this with young quarterbacks, and what do you do really well? Like, what are your 2 or 3 things that you're awesome at? Drake Maye's got an awesome arm. He's super athletic. He's a playmaker. We saw some of that stuff last night. What are the things you're not good at? We're going to work on that stuff, but looks like at least live bullets, the footwork looked a little better. I think that's what you take away as a Patriots fan and say, wow, I hope he plays 2 full quarters, next week, and say, okay, we got him almost a full game's worth over the preseason. Where are we at? What do we need to work on? And how can we kind of have tempered expectations going into year 1?
Yeah, so much to unpack here. Like, first of all, you're hearing it already. It was started last night. Some of the tweets from those covering the team, and then again some of the stuff this morning about quarterback competition back on. I'll just read you Giardi Maye from this morning. We talked to him about 9 o'clock via Zoom. Um, he was said, "Do you see this being a competition between the two of them right now as to who's going to be the starting quarterback against Cincinnati?" He said, "Quote, I do. We have 3 more days of training camp practices, and it's our job as coaches to evaluate. The competition isn't over. They're still going to go out there, and they have to show not only themselves, but their coaches, but also their teammates. So it's definitely still a competition." To which I would say, at this point, Jacoby Brissett is so far ahead in the competition that it's nice of him to leave the door open a crack. Maybe Drake blows doors off the next 3 days, has a great game against Washington, and all of a sudden you're like, it's all clicking and it's all happening. But to this point, and even through last night, he's not ready to be an NFL quarterback just yet. Or he's going to be the NFL quarterback that, say, Josh Allen was in his rookie year, where he completed 52% of his passes. And there's some spectacular, and there was also some, what in the world did he see? What is he doing? So I'm not going there with the competition yet. I know people are taking that quote. They're running with it. I know what my eyes have told me for the last 2.5 weeks. And while it was there was some promise last night, I need to see a lot more of that before I say, okay, now we're on to something. And now there's a chance that this kid could be ready for week 1 or sometime in September, October, which I think was probably the best hope to begin with. Like, look, he's raw. We're going to work through it. And then maybe by October or whatever, he's ready to go. I mean, Josh didn't start the first 4 games in Buffalo that rookie year. It was Nathan Peterman. And then they went to Allen. This sort of feels like if he comes along like that and they're comfortable with the idea of him having those highs and lows, then maybe, just maybe, it's an October conversation. But for right now, here in mid-August.
Yeah, isn't that the goal, though? I feel like let's not lose expectation, right? It's like I think it's perfectly okay if he doesn't play till week 6. This is a rebuilding year. Yeah. As we're going to talk about, it's a rebuilding year. Let him get all those reps and be, when he's, again, you're never ready, right? That's always like the joke, you don't have kids till you're ready, don't get married to, all these different things. But like, you're never fully ready, but you want to make him as ready as he can be. And I don't think it's going to hurt him to watch 2 or 3 weeks of Jacoby Brissett prepare, see how he is, evaluate where this team is at maybe week 3 or 4. Hey, we're a little better than we thought. We got some things ironed out. We feel pretty good about the situation. Soft landing spot, hey, maybe Thursday night at the Jets defense isn't the best spot, but maybe the week after or whatever it is. But I think it's okay to be patient with him. He's 21 years old. I just don't think we have to. This isn't Caleb Williams where it's like, we've never had a franchise quarterback really ever. And the one we kind of, a couple of ones we semi-had, we've either traded or moved on from and went other places. Like, this is not that situation. You don't want to make it like, you mentioned Josh Allen. That might be that's the exception to the rule of you don't want the Zach Wilson situation either, where it's like, hey, we throw him out there, bad team, bad habits, get created, confidence is killed, and then he's never the same. Let's just, I don't know, be patient with him. I think there's perfectly okay. It's not he's not a bad prospect because he doesn't start week 1.
Yeah, and it's on the Josh Allen track, and I'm not saying it's a 1-for-1 that Drake Maye is going to become Josh Allen, although I think there are some similarities. That he was 52% as a rookie, 59% in his second year. The thing didn't happen until the 3rd year. But the good thing that Buffalo did, the thing that they were committed to, was when they finally put him in there, he was in there. And they lived with the highs and lows. And they continued to try to support him. And they continued to try to work on his game. And finally, by year 3, he makes that massive leap that I think a lot of people never thought was possible, in terms of he went from 59% to 68, 69, 70, something crazy, right? Where all of a sudden it's like he's a real MVP candidate, which he's been now ever since. I'm leery of trying to attach too much to it, but the idea that what Buffalo did there was, we're going to support you the best we can. And that led to a process of surrounding him with better receiver talent, surrounding him with a better offensive line. And then finally in year 3, it was the addition of Stephon Diggs. And then things, as I said, took off for them entirely. This team doesn't have a Stephon Diggs. They don't have a very good offensive line. They're still trying to find the best 5, and you're midway through August. So there's still a lot of things there that I think need to be cleared up. Another interesting thing was, and again, I felt like people got a little too excited about the game last night, was like, well, hey, if the offensive line, would that ever come into play if you're deciding whether to play Maye or not, if he's ready? And Mayo said, look, if he beats out Jacoby, if he's the better quarterback, whenever that is, then we're going to play him. And I felt like that's another thing that I think people were latching onto, like, oh, he's not closing the door. It's just, let's just relax. Just again, I mean, I keep saying it. It was good. There were good signs. It was promise. But I need to see more. I want to see more. And most importantly, even though they're saying these things publicly, they know they need to see more from him. So this is a big week for him. But they're all big weeks at this point, So he's got to build off of that. And I will say there was a moment in the game, and he referenced it afterwards. He hit Javon Baker backside. Let's call it a 12-yard in cut, okay, where he had the same play in practice and he missed it. He didn't throw it. And in this one, he made his reads. He went right to left. It was nope, came back to that. He was a little patient, waited for the linebacker to be out of the way, and then put the ball right in there. And it was like, okay, again, good sign of growth, right? Now let's see more of it. And let's see less of as I mentioned, 3 of the 9 actual real throws he made were really sloppy. Bad footwork, ball sailed on him, ball was inaccurate. 33% of your throws on a small sample size, that's not great. So like that stuff's got to be cleaned up. So we can focus on the good, but you also can't lose sight of the fact that some of the stuff that we've seen throughout the course of the spring and summer still very much existed last night. So just want to put it in context, right? Like, yes, I feel better about it. I think everybody should feel better about it, but there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, who shouldn't feel better about it? Kenny Pickett. Listen, this is not a revisionist history. I was truly how I felt. I said at the time the Jets were coaching the Senior Bowl when Kenny Pickett came out, so I was down there, and I just remember being like, "Wow, this is really ugly." That class, him and Ritter were the 2 big names, 2 of the biggest names of that class. That class was awesome. The Senior Bowl, I think that year had like 16, 17 guys go in the first round, and I remember sitting there, and it was Malik Willis, Pickett, Ritter, all these different guys, and
you remember that? Remember when Malik Willis was going to be the number 1 pick in the draft?
Yeah, number 2 overall. Yeah, it was crazy. And, Hendon Hooker was going to be, the next great thing. The Pickett thing is tough because he's an accurate quarterback, right? And last night 11-13, you're just looking at it like, wow, awesome. In 67 yards, it's like that pick is just so mind-boggling how he was a first-round pick. Just the size, the hand size, the athleticism is good, not great. The arm strength's not great. The accuracy is good sometimes, but it's kind of like a check down merchant. And again, I'm not trying to just beat up on him. It's funny how that was like this big thing. Where's Kenny Pickett going to go this offseason? I can't believe he got traded. And then it's like, oh man, like Tanner McKee was significantly better than him last night. And I don't know. It's just a confusing one. It's just one of those draft things you look back at and you go, wow, man, like Ritter and these guys, like, it's just that class was billed as being bad. We've built some of these other classes, the 2021 class we all thought was going to be awesome. And outside of some moments with Trevor Lawrence, it just really hasn't been very good, obviously. That 2022 class is just abominable.
Yeah.
Abominable. So I want to point that out. I just felt like we didn't see much from Philly. Again, obviously they didn't play pretty much anyone of relevancy. But Kenny Pickett's probably the biggest name that played last night from a team perspective and was pretty awful. So that's just one thing I want to point out. I was like, man, I cannot believe that guy went in the first round still. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active users. PrizePicks, you can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Mike, we talk about it all the time, different players, different stats you like diving into. What do you like on your players? Drake Maye over sir, Patriots attempts, in a preseason game. Caitlin Clark in the WNBA coming back. She's finally rested for the first time in her WNBA career. Is she going to start putting on a show? I like using it. You like using it. Make sure you guys are tuned in to PrizePicks. I'm going to be taking some Caitlin Clark overs here next time I hop in there.
Yeah, smart. She was playing great before the Olympic break. Angel Reese, another one, right, who just double machine in the WNBA, if you're into that. Download the PrizePick app today. Use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Well, you're making me circle back, too, because the one last point I wanted to make about May was it was against the backups.
Yeah.
The Eagles, and again, sometimes against the backups, it hasn't looked good. So once again, there's a positive, and you can only play who's in front of you. And so if you play well, you got it. All right, he played well, but there were no starters out there. Bryce Huff played some last night. That was part of their plan, according to Vic Fangio, that a couple of the new guys, they wanted to just like get more reps just so they get more and more comfortable with the system. But basically, as Nick Sirianni said pregame or Wednesday, whatever it was like, look, it was a physical practice on Tuesday. Our guys got a ton of snaps. I feel no desire to put them in that situation. Not enough time for them to regroup, physically. And let's face it, in the back of his head, he's also thinking, and I'm not getting any of these guys hurt. We made it through Tuesday's practice. Everybody was fine. The backups, you guys have to go earn your job. Somebody's got to play. But by and large, like, we're going to put those guys on ice. It's interesting that we're talking about the NFC South, and we're going to get to that in just a bit. But there were some moves made by a what I felt like is probably, I don't know, we'll get to it, the best team in the division, which might be damning them with faint praise. But that's the Atlanta Falcons, who made two big moves, a trade and then a signing. And we'll start with the signing. Justin Simmons, who remarkably here on August the 15th, it wasn't until August the 15th that he finds a team, because he's still a good player, maybe not the player he was in Denver 2 or 3 years ago, but still had a pretty good season for them last year. They decided to move on as they, go through the cap calculations over there. But Atlanta signs him to a 1-year, $8 million deal. Now pairs him with Jesse Bates. And I say to myself, like, man, even if he's 90% of what he was last year, that's a good, solid addition for a team that has real dreams of winning the division.
Yeah, like the couple of things with Justin Simmons, sorry. It's not Jesse Simmons, because Jesse, I guess it'll be a good nickname for them. But no, look, the Simmons thing was interesting. I think, again, 2-3 years ago, very strong argument. He was the best safety in the league. I think him and Minka had that, like, kind of, going back and forth thing. Now both guys, I think, are, not quite the players in different reasons, than they were. I don't know if Simmons is, like, that much worse than he used to be. I just think that Denver's defense kind of started to suck and change schemes. And the guys around you, again, I think he's probably lost a half a step, maybe a full step, depending on if you're a Broncos fan or a fan of a different team. Still a ball hawk. A couple years ago, 10 interceptions. He's like good for 3 to 6 or 7 interceptions a year, which is unbelievable if you're on the back end. The scheme fit, I shouldn't even say scheme fit. The scheme fit's fine. The fit between him and Bates will be a bit interesting. I think the one question mark is, like, both guys are more center fielders, ball hawk type of guys. Who's going to come up and play more in the box? Maybe they just kind of don't use as much of a nickel, and they use another linebacker as kind of more of that, and they play with 2 safeties because Simmons and Bates are so good in coverage. We'll see what they do and how they deploy that. Raheem Morris, you trust, and again, we'll talk about that a little bit. But on the face of it, like, $18 million cap hit last year, he would have had this year. Denver obviously is in. We talked about them and kind of the reasons they moved on. Obviously, at some point, you can't just keep restructuring. It's not the right window, all those things. I'm surprised it took this long to sign, but in my head, I'm like, was Bates kind of sitting there saying, like, I don't really want to have to age 30 season. Do I really want to be in camp for 6 weeks? I'll be in camp for 2.5 weeks. I'll get ready to go. I'll work my way back by the time camp's kind of essentially over here in about 8 days. For most teams where they had that mini bye, like, I'll work myself in. I'll be ready for week 1. Basically a fully guaranteed deal. So from Bates' perspective, from a Simmons perspective, that's awesome. Getting a pretty much almost double-digit $1 million deal. Plus, if he has a great year this year, he'll go out and get a 2-year, $25 million deal. The safety market was extremely depressed, throughout all of the offseason. So I like the signing for Atlanta. And again, for Simmons, you go get a chance to go play indoors. 8 or 9 games a year. Get to go to play with Raheem Morris, who has been, again, we'll get to him, but this Falcons team has taken a huge jump in the last 24 hours in terms of defensive talent. And again, fully guaranteed deal pretty much at this point in the summer is very rare. And I think if you're him, hey, go and get $8 million, go try to win. And he gets to go get it next to a really nice safety duo and coach that should really get the best out of him at this point in his career.
And then there's the trade for Matthew Judon, which, finally went down. As I've been saying, they needed to poo or get off the pot for a long time. They knew what the number was. They weren't willing to match the number. They knew they were really far apart. What the hell are we doing? Why are we waiting for this? I clearly there was a come to Jesus moment, I think, between the Patriots front office and Judon, where they said, look, we're not going to make it. It's not happening, but we need you to be out there in practice to show everybody that you're still engaged, that you're a good teammate, and we will move you. And I am not, it came down to 2 offers. Chicago also apparently offered a 3rd-round pick, as the Falcons did as well. It would not surprise me in the least bit if Matthew Judon was allowed to pick his spot as sort of a thank you for playing ball with us here at the end. You know, they could have said whatever. There's also been some pushback that, oh, maybe the Patriots could have gotten something, you know, maybe the Bears pick should be way better than the Falcons pick. One is predicted to, their over-under is 9.5, and the Bears is 8.5. It's like, it's not that big of a divide. The Bears actually think they have a chance to win the division as well, or at least be a playoff team. So I don't make too much of that, but I think Judon was given a little bit of a pat on the back on the way out for, hey, you gave us, 2+ years of good service, and then you did us a solid here by being a real teammate in the final week and not causing any more destruction for our first-year head coach and our first-year GM. But for Atlanta to get a player of that caliber, a motivated player, because as of right now, the deal hasn't been changed. He's still on that same deal that he doesn't like. And, there's been reports that he'll play under it. I think I believe there's a wink, wink, nod there too of like, we'll at least give you a bump for this year to make you a little bit more whole and make you feel a little bit more comfortable. And then you can do what you do in the off season, or maybe we like you so much we figure something out during the season. But for a team that thinks that they can win the division, adding Simmons and then adding Judon for a pass rusher, again, with Raheem Morris as the guy pulling the strings, makes a lot of sense, and it's a good deal in the short term for Atlanta.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for Atlanta was the Penix pick. Part of the reason it was so confusing in a lot of ways, not only just because of the Kirk thing, it's because they needed an edge rusher, like really badly, and they were in a spot where, hey, they're going to get the best edge rusher on the board. They're going to have their pick of the litter. Do they go Byron Murphy? They go Jared Verse? What do? They obviously went neither. They go, Penix. Well, now they end up getting their guy. And, again, I don't know. We'll see if Judon's there a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it may be. I believe Judon's fourth in the NFL, over the last 3 years in sacks per game, 12.5, 15.5, and then 4 last year in just 4 games. Ton of quarterback hits, tackles for losses, top 10 player in 2022 and defensive player of the year voting. He's 32 years old, coming off an injury. So, again, but by all accounts, you mentioned it the other day, like comes back into practice after being a bit of a nozzle. Shout out to the Michael K show for the last couple weeks and doing what he's got to do to get himself paid, and was dominant. So I think for Judon, again, go play indoors, for half the season in a division with some serious quarterback questions across the division and things like that. And yeah, he should feast in the system. Again, we've seen. I keep coming back to Raheem Morris, but like part of the reason Atlanta hired him was like, hey, we got all this offensive talent. We're going to give you a quarterback. Go make our defense at least good. And adding Judon and Simmons in a 12-hour-ish window, 24-hour window is damn good business. Giving up a third-round pick, if they're going to be as good as they think they are, that's barely a top 100 pick for New England. I mentioned it. I keep coming back to this. You mentioned maybe around a 4th rounder. I thought maybe it'd be more around a 2. They end up at around a 3, obviously, or they do end up with a 3, not around a 3. But the timelines did match. And for the Patriots, again, you're kind of kicking yourself. I mentioned this with Ayuk and stuff. It's like, damn, like would have loved to have that extra 3rd-round pick this year and be able to kind of get a year of experience with, some of the other guys they brought in with the rookie quarterback. But, they'll have another top 100 pick next year. They'll have more cap space. It just makes sense. And I think for the Patriots, it's like he was going to get moved at some point. Maybe you hold on to the deadline and some team gets desperate and gives you a 2. But there's also the chance he could have gotten hurt again, or he's not as good, or the market's not the same. So I just felt like at this point, clear yourself of the distraction, embrace what you're going to be. Everything is about the rookie quarterback this year and figuring out if you have the head coach and the rookie quarterback. Judon probably would have helped you see if you had the coach. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know. It makes most sense. And again, for Atlanta, Arthur Blank is not getting any younger. It's part of why the Kirk Cousins signing happened. And if you're Raheem Morris, you're pretty excited about, hey, first year and down in Atlanta, already got Grady Jarrett, AJ Terrell. Obviously we mentioned Bates. Adding a guy like Judon that you can count on probably for, if healthy, I think you comfortably say he's a 10 sack plus guy. I think that's what the track record shows you. It's pretty damn good, and it helps your chances of hosting a home playoff game and saying, man, do we get, Dallas at home who chokes in the wild card every year? Do we get that? And all of a sudden we find ourselves now on, divisional round weekend. Can we be the 3 seed and host the back-to-back? Like, the conversation starts to change a lot for them. And I just think Judon raises their ceiling quite a bit and honestly hires their floor. Judon is at worst, like 8 sacks this year. And maybe he's back to the 15 sack guy. We don't know, but I like the deal for both sides. Patriots made the smart long-term play. The Falcons in the short term are trying to capitalize on Kirk. All these guys on rookie deals, like they're doing exactly what they should be doing.
Yeah, I had mixed emotions about it. Like I say it's a good deal. The return, getting a third is at this point, yeah, absolutely. Like that's great. The flip side is it's just another example of this isn't about 2024. It's about 2025. And they've tried to toe the line and tried to say that they can be competitive. But you've heard every once in a while Gerard Mayo slip and start talking about next year. And then, like I said it the other day, like the cast back, reel it back in. I didn't say that. I didn't mean to say that, like that sort of thing. And now you had the owner this week saying, I don't know how many wins we're going to have, which is a far cry from where they were a year ago when he's like, we haven't had a playoff win. We're talking about playoffs. And now you're in this point where, look, admit it, openly embrace it. You are a rebuilding team. Wins, while nice, aren't what they're going to be measured on this year. That coaching staff is not going to be measured on that. It's going to be, do you develop the young players? Do you get buy-in from the players that you have, whether they're fringe players, the players that you re-upped, the core that they decided to re-up from a 4-13 team as they basically gave contracts out to everybody? Like, did that work? Was that worth it? And are you building to something good? And then obviously at the end of the day, is Drake Maye making progress so that you don't go into next year's draft when you have a top 5 pick, which is very possible, right? And say, we might need to do a quarterback thing again, right? Like you don't want to be Arizona with Josh Rosen / Kyler Murray. You don't want to be in that spot. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I know it maybe feels like I'm sitting on the fence a little bit there, but I do. I feel like good return, but like you're not going to be a good team. And I didn't think you were going to be a good team, but you were trying to tell me that you had a chance to be a good team. And now it's clear that's not what you meant. You never meant that. You were never going to be in that direction anyway.
Yeah, you mentioned the lack of pressure in a sense, from New England in terms of like the wins and losses. I would say this ratchets the pressure up tremendously for Atlanta. I think they were already a team that was kind of not sneaky, but pretty confident. It was like, hey, them and the Bucs are probably the two teams in the South that you feel good about in some senses based on the roster, et cetera. This puts a lot of pressure on Raheem Morris. And it's not like, oh, I'm sure he already had pressure and it's not about that, but the Falcons got to go. Like they have to go win now. Like this is not they are all in right now as all as you can be. And I'm sure at the deadline, if they're still good, they'll go try to acquire more pieces. Maybe they part with a second rounder for X player that's on the market. But they signing Justin Simmons and trading for Matthew Judon and trading again top 100 capital for a 32-year-old edge rusher. While I think it's a great move, it shows me you are putting a lot of pressure on this year and like. I don't think they can afford to sit there and go start 2-5. Like they're not like they got to get out to a good start. And again, the division isn't great, and we're kind of get into it now. But I really feel like this is for Atlanta. Like the pressure is like they are not a sleeper anymore. They are the NFC is not awesome in my opinion, and like they should feel. If you're a Falcons fan, you should be like we should be making some noise in this conference. Even before this happened, now you kind of solidified 2 of your biggest needs. Go out and win some ball games.
Well, interesting that you mentioned sort of the schedule. You only start off 2-5. They open at home against Pittsburgh. We know Pittsburgh travels very well, and Atlanta not necessarily known for being a strong home field advantage. Then they're at Philadelphia on Monday. Then they host Kansas City in week 3 before they get into the division. So, I mean, you're right. Get off that because you can easily look at Philadelphia and KC and say those are 2 losses. Pittsburgh could be a coin flip, depending on what Pittsburgh gets out of their quarterback play. So you don't want to be 0-3 with all the money that you spent. And as you mentioned, with the division being as wide open as it is. And we did sort of meld into with Simmons and Judon. We've sort of melded into the AFC South preview starting with the Falcons. And we've talked a lot about defense. We've mentioned the quarterbacks a little bit, still perplexed by the decision to draft Penix. Penix looks really good, as we talked about in our last pod on Wednesday, and that's not surprising. He may be as ready as any of the rookie quarterbacks to, if he had to step in right away and play, he could be the one that maybe, and look, Williams and Jane Daniels are going to play, but I think he could make a pretty smooth transition to be a starter this year if they needed him to be. But they invested all this money in Cousins coming off the Achilles, and they invested a lot of money in Zach Robinson, the offensive coordinator. Came along part of the package deal, if you will, with Raheem Morris. He was a hot candidate, as everybody in the McVay tree has been from an offensive side. I know the Patriots were interested in talking to him, and I don't know if they interviewed him or not, but I do know that there wasn't a lot of interest on his part to be part of what the Patriots were doing, where Atlanta obviously there are pieces. Kyle Pitts hasn't turned out to be this worthy of a top 5 pick, especially at that position of tight end. He's essentially a wide receiver. Drake London's a top 10 pick. Bijan Robinson, a top 10 pick. Now you add Cousins to the mix. I like their offensive line. I think it's incumbent upon Zach Robinson to figure out a way to get the ball in the playmaker's hands much more frequently than Arthur Smith did last year. And if that means running Bijan Robinson into the ground, then and not giving touches to Algier, who's a good back. Don't get me wrong, but like Bijan has a chance to be special. Bijan should be getting the ball 20-ish times a game. Like he should be start morphing into that Christian McCaffrey type. You saw it last year. Like he turned little checkdowns into 15-yard gains like that constantly. Like he was fantastic, and they just didn't use him enough. Now they have a competent quarterback who knows what he wants to do with the ball, and they should be able to take advantage of the pieces that they have and be a significantly better offense than they were last year under Arthur Smith.
Yeah, you mentioned the defense. They're still, obviously have nice pieces in Terrell, Jarrett, obviously Judon now, Simmons, Bates, et cetera. Like this should be a pretty solid unit. At worst it's solid and just good. And again, good coaching should make them a little bit better. I just look at this team and think like, man, I think at least six first round starters on this offense. Mm-hmm. That's not even including Penix, obviously, maybe potentially at some point. I understand the fascination with Pitts in terms of what they can get out of him. And I totally get it. Maybe he'll have a monster year, and who knows. I'm far more fascinated in how they deploy, London and Mooney and Pitts all at once. Pitts and him or London are two bigger body receivers. They can be mismatch nightmares. Like I think London's been awesome. He's a pro. It just we haven't gotten to see him as much. Mooney's the interesting one. 2 years ago, or 2022 is or 2021. I apologize, 1,000-yard receiver, in Chicago, and then like the last 2 years, it's not the same. What does he look like? And you mentioned those backs, leaning on the play action game. It'll be interesting. Again, I think the big question is going to be Kirk and what's he look like. What's he fully look like off the Achilles? Do we see any difference? Kirk was having a really good year he's put up great numbers. Like that's never the problem. I think the Falcons team should be a 10 or 11 win team. Like I really do. And even if they had Penix right now starting, I'd feel pretty good about where they would be at. I'd probably still pick them to win the division, even if Penix was started, Kirk didn't, wasn't here. I'd feel pretty good about like, hey, Penix has got, he's ready to go rolling in terms of like pro ready guys.
Yep.
And again, talented offensive coordinator, talented head coach, good defense, really special talent on the offensive side of the football. You play inside, weather is not an issue. We've seen the Falcons get good out of nowhere quick before. We've seen it happen. So I just think that, and I know the head coach difference is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a really big deal. And when you feel good about the coach, you feel like the quarterback's at worst. What's Kirk at worst? The 12th best quarterback in the league.
Yeah.
He's in that range. Should be pretty competent. We saw the Bucs last year going in division with Baker, and I think Kirk is significantly better than Baker Mayfield is. To me, this division, and we'll continue to talk about these teams, but this division comes down to like, if you're the Falcons, like, can you get Drake London 8 touches a game, Kyle Pitts 6, Bijan 20, and then sprinkle in, other stuff to Mooney, Algier, some of these other guys should be pretty good again. And I'd be really disappointed if we left 2024 going, man, like Pitts really isn't that good. And Bijan's awesome, but he's not really in that McCaffrey tier yet. Like, yeah, Bijan's on a rookie deal, man. Like, this is what you do. I'm not trying to beat up on running backs, but this is what you do. We're going to talk about it with Breece Hall when we get to the Jets. Like, as much as you think about what are they going to be at 27, well, they're 22, so you don't have to worry about that. Let's go utilize these talented guys.
You should not worry about the guys. You're trying to win now, and look, it's not, again, not trying to your point, not trying to like just beat up on the guy, use him like a disposable item, but that's kind of what the NFL is, right? The moment you show signs that you're not that guy anymore, the team parts ways with you. But if they're trying to win now, I'm getting Bijan a crap ton of touches. If I'm Philadelphia, I said it this week, your quote just then, I said it this week when I'm watching Philadelphia, I'm like, man, Barkley would never come off the field for me. I wouldn't, Kenneth Gainwell, forget you. Like, don't, Will Shipley, like, that's great, wonderful. Like, I'm going to have Saquon on the field 80% of my snaps on offense. Like, and he's going to be a focal point of what I do because he's that good. I'm paying him that money for that reason. He's that good. So use him. Don't protect him. That just, I don't like the logic on that. The one other thing I'll say about the Penix pick, and you were talking, I pulled up the draft picks, the order. And okay, Odunze, with their receivers, did they need that? No. JJ McCarthy, Fashanu, who ends up with that might have been a nice little, their line has been together for a while, but there's some age there. That could have been a nice little piece to add to their offensive line. Fuaga, again, 14. But then Latu, Byron Murphy, Dallas Turner go 15, 16, 17. That could have been a place where not only you could still add him, you could still add a Matthew Judon.
Latu would have been pretty.
I just wonder.
I guess before we go to the next team here, over under on Penix. If I give you 3.5 starts, where are you going?
I mean, Kirk's a dog and a warrior. You could say with the things you want about him, but if you watch the Netflix series about him just getting his ribs killed and staying in the game and the stuff that he does during the course of the week, even away from this facility to get ready, I think it's going to be under 3.5.
Yeah, I think that's right around. I think we get a Penix start this year. I just don't know when.
Yeah.
I think maybe Kirk, rolls an ankle and they're really cautious with him because they're 6-2 and
right.
They can do it. I just think there's gonna be a lot of pressure because if Kirk starts slow, which would be totally acceptable coming off an injury, if he starts slow, that fan base is gonna be like, "Hey man, we want to see Penix. That's our homegrown guy. That's just what happens." I just think it's gonna be on Raheem Morris and the staff to be very tune out the noise. Kirk's our guy until he's not, and he's not going anywhere. That's the problem. That's why I get confusing.
That's 2 years at the very least.
At very big money. So, I think the Falcons will be the team that wins the division, and I feel pretty good about them. I felt good about them before these trades, and now I feel much better about solidifying some of the needs on the back end and up front in the front seven.
Will, you love in the summertime. I know you. You love to go to Yankees games. I'm not going to hold it against you. It's a nice park. The team I can live without, but whatever. You're that guy. Who do you use? Do you use anybody in particular when you need your tickets and you want to find that best seat? Maybe the day of. You're like, oh man, I got time. I'm going to go to a game time. It's beautiful out. Me and the girl, we're going to go to the game.
Game Time app. It's incredibly easy to use, incredibly efficient. You find some of the best seats and some of the best deals, on the market for whether you're going to Yankees, Red Sox, or any type of sport.
Yeah, it's funny. My daughter keeps saying, when are we going to a game? When are we going to a game? I'm like, well, let me get the app. We put the app, we go, bam, we're done. It's so simple. It's so easy. The interface is just fantastic. You want to use that. GameTime.co. Last minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you need. Game Time's got it.
Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets this season with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
All right, let's move on. And it was interesting as I was kind of going through the order in my head. Who's the next best team in the division? Because I think Atlanta should win the division. And Carolina's a dumpster fire. I'm not really, they're not in the conversation. And I settled here on Tampa Bay, but I got to tell you, I don't love the roster. I think maybe they did it a little bit with smoke and mirrors last year. They obviously lose their offense coordinator. Dave Canales is now coaching. He's the head coach for Carolina. So they were 9-8 last year. They're middle of the road, 18th in DVOA, 20th in offense, which kind of surprised me just based on the Mayfield, Mike Evans, sort of the hype of last season. And obviously when you saw them in the playoffs, there were some really good moments. I mean, they went toe to toe with the big dogs there in San Francisco and pushed them in the divisional round. But can you really expect Baker to get better at this point? Liam Cohen comes in as the OC. There's some familiarity there. They've worked together before, but Canales did such a great job, not only with Baker, but in the past with Geno Smith. Even you can go back to Russell Wilson had a bounce back year under Canales before he left Seattle as well. I don't know. I don't know if, Baker has been mostly bad or mostly average, however you want to phrase it. 2 good years, 5 not so good years, right? Do I think he can build off of that? I don't know. I don't know where I feel like Baker might be who Baker is, and it's going to be that streaky guy. And last year, maybe he got on a bit of a hot streak, and maybe he regresses to the mean this year.
Yeah, the Bucks are a weird one because I feel like there's still some really nice pieces. Evans is still awesome, although obviously he's not getting any younger, but he's still an awesome player, and it was great they were able to retain him. Wirth is amazing. Obviously, I mean, God, every team botched with that.
Yep.
In that draft class and things like that. Graham Barton, I really liked coming out. I'm really excited to see him in that offense. Chris Godwin, obviously, another year removed from the injury to see kind of get back a little bit more to the player he was 2 years ago. He was a good player still, but Rashad White, I like you see some pieces there. Kate Otten has showed some moments. Like the offense should be solid. I think the one thing you worry about with Baker is go back to 2020. 3,500 yards, 26 touchdowns, 8 picks, 63%. Goes into 2021, I felt like expectations were really high, and it was pretty average, if not great. As a starter, 6-8, he had the injuries and stuff, but 17 touchdowns, 13 picks. The biggest question you have with Baker sometimes is it's good, and then he gets too excited or too almost overconfident about how athletic he is, or just how good big his arm is. He does have a big arm, but then he regresses and starts turning the football over. So that's the one thing I think is for the Bucs is basically do everything we just did last year with him in the sense of have him take care of the football, lean on Evans, lean on Godwin, lean over the middle of the field, run the football well, lean on Barton and Wirfs on that left side, or if Barton's going to play center, I don't know how they're going to kind of operate that. Cody Maw, another guy, they're in a good spot offensively. They're not great. They should be middle of the pack. I just think lean on your playmakers and hopefully limit the mistakes. Defensively is where it's a little weird for the Bucs because you obviously have Bowles, and he is who he is. He's going to run what he's going to run, and we know that that's going to work. They still have some awesome players, right? Levante's still an awesome player.
Yeah,
they probably still haven't honestly upgraded by losing Devin White. I think Devin White was the most overrated player in the NFL, over the last few years. They bring Jordan Whitehead back with Winfield. This had help in terms of that's just how those guys know how to play each other well. They obviously won a title with them. On the back end, Yaya Diaby showed some nice moments. Just try on Shayenka, show something. I feel like that's been one of those picks where it's
that's one of those things that he needs to, right? Because Shaq Barrett retired. You've got to find where's your
him and Logan Hall. You got to get something out of them, and then Cansey, I loved coming out. I'm excited about what he's going to look like, another year in the system. And Vita Vea is obviously still a stud. So you're this team's good. I just think this team's a 9-win team. I look at them and think they are a team that's going to compete for a wild card in the NFC and try to sneak in, and they'll end up playing Dallas or Philly or Green Bay or one of these teams, whoever ends up being the 2 seed. That's what it feels like, where they kind of are who they are. They're good in some spots. They could be better in other spots. Some of the issues are some of those key players are maybe starting to be on the wrong side of where they're at. Evans hasn't dropped off yet, but it's eventually going to happen. Hopefully it doesn't happen. I hope for Bucs fans and Evans it doesn't happen. Levante David's been pretty much just incredible forever, and is eventually that going to fall off? There's you just look at it and you go, man, this Godwin, does it finally fall? I don't know. I just feel like they've had this core for a while, and they were able to retain pretty much everybody that I thought they should have. I feel, Jason Light's obviously a great GM, and they've drafted really well, and Cansey and Barton, and he's got young guys, lean on them. I just feel like Atlanta's better, and I still feel like the Bucs are far better than the Saints and the Panthers, who we'll get to. I just worry you're kind of that in between. They were a 9-win team last year. They were competitive, but they are who they are, and they caught Philly at the right time. I think they were competitive in Detroit, but obviously fell short. And I just think you worry a little with Baker. When's the regression going to come in terms of the turnovers? Not that he's regression in terms of being a bad quarterback. I don't think he's a bad quarterback at all. But last year, he was probably a top 12 guy, and there's a lot of times where he's been the 23rd guy. And if that regression happens, they probably become a 6 or 7-win team. And if he stays back right where he was last year, they're an 8 or 9-win team competing for a wild card spot, which I think is fine. They're in a kind of a transition period, phasing out some of the older guys, leaning on them, but phasing them out and keeping them together and developing the young guys. I just think they are smack dab, 9-win team. I felt like that way with Jacksonville. I feel this way about Tampa. It's good pieces, good moments. Coach has some really nice moments, has some bad moments. We're not really sure. I don't know. I know it's a lukewarm take. I just feel like they're a 9-win team, and that's what they are.
It's kind of a lukewarm team. And
yeah.
And yeah, I look at some of the picks, Bucky Irving maybe as a change of pace back for them. I really like Bucky. He's a smaller dude coming out of Oregon, but pass catching, what can he sort of elements can he bring? Jalen McMillan, of course, the third of the three Washington receivers. As we were joking around here during the course of the season in New England, and then even as we started, getting deeper into the draft stuff, it's like, well, they might have three receivers on a college roster that are better than anybody you have on your roster. It was at least close. Certainly, Jalen Polk's already probably a starter for the Patriots, so they got one of those guys. Chris Braswell, who he's an interesting guy because I think the skill set says he should be a better pass rusher than he is, but yet he never quite got to that level at Alabama. Can he do it here at the next level? That's difficult to do, but Bowles is obviously a defensive first coach and has had a way of bringing out some of those traits in players. But I think they're going to need contributions from the kids. And Barton, you mentioned, who I love Barton. I think that's a home run pick. Someone posted a video clip of him maybe yesterday or the day before, and it was like, oh yeah, just give him Rookie of the Year already. Basically, they were fawning over him, his mobility. And someone who, when he was coming out, it was like, oh, he could play tackle, he could play guard, he could play center. I know a lot of people. I feel like Tampa's settling him on at center, but like he's a good football player. No one likes to talk about interior offensive linemen.
No, of course not. They're mad.
But he's good. All right, so we move on to the Saints, who also fall into the sort of, if they made the playoffs, would I be surprised? No. Do I like the roster? Not. I don't hate it. I don't love it. Do I love the coach, Dennis Allen? No, not really. Like, they're just sort of 9-8 last year. They were actually 15th in DVOA, 17th offensively, 15th defensively. And what I wrote down when I was sort of going over their season last year and looking at their roster and reading some of the reports out of New Orleans, well, they've been in California for this entire training camp, was who and what are they? Because they have been a team that has probably more than anyone in the modern salary cap era have continually found creative ways to be in a we're playing for it now mode or trying to play for a playoff spot mode, even when you could probably have made the argument a couple times now that they should have just said, let's take the hit this year. Let's kind of stink and let's reload with some younger players. But no, they like to, manufacture contracts that have a billion dead years kicked on them. And look, I believe the cap is easily malleable. And I think they've proven that since about 2016 with the way they've operated their cap. But I'm not sure what their identity is. I mean, I know they were a good defense, but even that, it's not like a suffocating, dominating defense. Obviously in all the Peyton years, their identity was Sean and Drew Brees, and how they were able to consistently create offensively, and Brees obviously having a ridiculous career after leaving the Chargers. And that was their identity. Their identity the last few years is, I don't know. I don't know what it is, and I don't know what it's going to be because some of the pieces that they've attached big money to are either not going to play. Ryan Ramczyk, who appears his knee injury may be career-ending. But even Cam Jordan, it's been 5 years since Cam Jordan was a star, and yet people still talk about him like he's a star. They're moving him inside now in the pass rush. That's the point we are with 35-year-old Cam Jordan. He's no longer the edge guy on pass rush. They have to move him over the guard and hope he can eat up a smaller, less athletic player on the inside. So I just 9-8, 8-9, 7-10.
Yep.
Bottom fall out 6-11 maybe. Like that's kind of where I'm at with them.
Yeah, they're kind of similar how I feel about Tampa. I feel a little bit better about Tampa knowing the infrastructure. I feel better about Tampa because their quarterback's not Derek Carr, and I think Derek Carr is really brutal to watch. Like I don't know how else to say it.
Captain check down, man. He does not want to push the ball.
It's tough. But like you look at this team, right? And like, okay, Olave you feel good about. Obviously you want to keep him healthy. Even Shaheed you feel decent about because he's a nice fun player. Kamara, well, I don't know what's going to happen with Kamara and Jamal Williams. And, it's a great backfield on paper, but, what are we getting, from them? The offensive line, Fuaga, I think is going to be a nice player. I don't think he's left tackle, so I'm shocked that that's where he's going to go here. The Penning pick looks worse and worse. Didn't like him coming out. We talked about that same Senior Bowl with Kenny Pickett. You left that going geez, Trevor Penning's, really physical. That's great, but, I don't see it. So, we'll see. Obviously, they've, taken Ruiz quite high. And, I just don't – the Derek Carr thing is concerning. And it's concerning because now they're locked in 2 more years. He kind of has a pretty high ceiling, and the floor is not that high either. He's going to put up nice numbers, but you never really – I know I'm being, like, really negative about Carr. Something about it, like the numbers last year on paper, like, wow, 25 touchdowns, 8 picks, like really high completion, good yardage. And then it's like every time I turned on the game, I felt like he was terrible. So, I just don't know. It's hard to tell with them. I think defensively, they're still a good group. Warner and DeMario are obviously unbelievable. DeMario, again, similar to Levante. I'm kind of saying the same things about both teams. Like, there's still really nice pieces on both sides of the football. Lattimore, what are you going to get out of him? Tyrann Mathieu, obviously, household name, and Cam Jordan, but those guys are probably, on the wrong side of 30, obviously. Polson and Debo I like. Willie Gay's a really nice player. Like, Granderson, what do they get out of Chase Young, Peyton Turner? Like, there's potential there where this team wins nine-ish games, and you're like, all right, Carr had a good year. We got Pete Kamara. Olave took the step into being this next really awesome guy. We feel good about Fuaga, and the defense was solid. But I have a lot of questions about the quarterback, and I have even more questions about the head coach. I would have fired Dennis Allen. I don't get it. I think he's got to be – I don't have the odds in front of me. He's got to be up there on first coach fired rankings. Like, I don't get the Dennis Allen hype. I thought he was a good defensive coordinator, but I don't think he was, like, special. I think he was a good – and, like, as a head coach, he's not been good. Like, I've not seen a single time I've gone on and Twitter and looked at what Saints fans are talking about the team and had anyone say anything positive about Dennis Allen. Like, haven't seen it. I'm not sure I'll ever see it. I don't know. Again, I'm not trying to say that they're not good, because I think there is moments there where they could potentially figure out a way to be good. But, like, Dennis Allen kind of is who he is. Like, 2 years with the Saints, it's 16 and 18. Like, great. No playoffs, obviously. Oakland was 4-12, 4-12, 0-4. Again, a long time ago. Yeah. But we haven't really seen it. And again, with Carr and Allen as the two faces of the franchise, head coach and quarterback, it's hard for me to get as excited about, could they get something out of Chase Young with, who knows, even though his knees are probably shot, or can they get something out of this or that? It's like they're kind of an 8 or 9 win team. I feel like it's like Atlanta 10 or 11 wins, depending on what Kirk you get and stuff like that. And then it's like Tampa's 9 wins, Atlanta 8 wins, and we'll get to Carolina, but they're probably a 4-win team. So this division, it gets very mediocre very quickly.
It stinks and it sucks a little bit. We just in totality. It's funny you mentioned Carr, right? And your feelings about him, and I sure shared the same things. But last year, in December, 10 touchdown passes. They won 3 or 4 games. And you're like, if he and Pete Carmichael, the offensive coordinator, like, it's finally starting to click with the two of them, at least. Like, they're starting to play in a certain manner that is highlighting Derek's play. They fire Carmichael in the offseason. Yeah. They bring in Clint Kubiak to, of course, run the San Francisco Shanahan scheme. Kubiak called plays in Minnesota, didn't call plays in San Francisco. Obviously, that's Shanahan's bag. So this is another one of those, like, Patriots did it with Alex Van Pelt. It's that West Coast offense. It's that tree. It's that. But Alex hasn't called plays for real since 2009, even though he's had the offensive coordinator title. He had it for 4 years in Cleveland under Stefanski. Stefanski called the plays. And now Kubiak was the passing game coordinator there. Wasn't even a play caller. Like, is he the next guy, or is it just you decided you wanted to pluck from that tree, even if you're not sure this guy is the guy that's going to take you over to the top and unlock, if there is another level to Derek Carr. The one other thing I'll tell you, my buddy Nick Underhill for New Orleans football nobody covers New Orleans football, the Saints football, like Nick does. Nick used to work up here. He's a friend, but I admire the hell out of his work. He's as detailed as any reporter. The practice reports are insane. I encourage people to go out and subscribe to his website. I think it's worth it if you just as a football fan in general. And if you're a Saints fan, then I don't know what you're doing if you're not. He's indicated there is a little Spencer Rattler buzz. There's been a little Spencer Rattler buzz. And he and I text from periodically, and he's like, I'm not going to jump out ahead and say, like, this is it. But he's like, there's some things here that I'm seeing. And look, I'm a heightist at the position, which is why at the end of the day, even though the more I watched Rattler, the more accepting I was of, like, he could end up being a good NFL quarterback. But now to hear Nick, who treats quarterbacks as harshly as I do, think that there's something there, then maybe we'll see. I'm still a heightist, but maybe he can sort of he can correct my path here, or at least make an addendum to the path, because he obviously his arm he can spin it as well as any of the guys we saw at the Senior Bowl, right? In fact, he might have of the guys at the Senior Bowl, he might have thrown it the best of all of them during the course of the full week. So. That's just an interesting one. I keep it in mind if New Orleans does get off to a sloppy start, or Carr, even though they've committed to him, if it's not going well, and Dennis Allen's looking, hey, this is my job on the line, would he pull Carr and go for Rattler at some point if Rattler continues to make progress? I just think it's something to kind of keep an eye on, maybe something that could be intriguing about that team and give them potentially a little juice. I don't know definitively, but there have been good signs. And you mentioned a team that's probably the one that is going to win 4 games, maybe. The Carolina Panthers. I don't think there's any question. I don't know why the Panthers came out of my mouth weird.
I was going to let it slide.
No. I caught it. I was like, what was that? Yeah, you brought a little accent to it. They were 2-15 last year. And look, the coaching staff was a debacle. They blew it out. They hired Canales. And I think they hired Canales with the idea of, if someone can fix our investment in Bryce Young as the number 1 overall pick, 1 pick ahead of C.J. Stroud, Canales might be our best hope here. And early reports out of Carolina are decent, okay, that there's been some progress made. But look, I was kind of going back, and I mentioned earlier when we were talking about what Canales did with Mayfield, Smith, even Russell Wilson in Seattle. Does he have that magic to bring here a little bit and sprinkle some of that fairy dust on Bryce Young, who, look, he doesn't have the biggest arm. We know the size is an issue. Speaking of the heightest thing again, not a sub 6 foot quarterback. But does he have more answers for this kid? And I think that's important. Like, I think it really all hinges. Like, I think it's a massive year for Bryce Young, because I think if this doesn't work and Carolina's really bad again, then I think Carolina finds themselves in the quarterback market. And with David Tepper, they could find themselves in the market for a new head coach as well, because, it's never his fault. It's everybody else's fault. And if Canales can't fix Bryce Young, I don't know what that guy will do.
Yeah, I just don't really know what the Panthers are. Like, I don't want to be super negative.
Just call it like you see it.
This one's obviously be a much, a quicker one than we talked about Atlanta, because it's the reality of the situation. But, like, love J.C. Horn. Hopefully he stays healthy, because he's really fun to watch play football. Like, I hope we have it. We've seen Derek Brown get better. Again, still too many inconsistencies for me to be kind of put him in that elite tier, but he's obviously got all the talent to be an awesome player. Dane Jackson was nice in Buffalo. Cool. They signed Clowney. Clowney was awesome last year, but, I don't know, year to year, sometimes you don't know what you're getting with Jadeveon Clowney in terms of everything. We'll see. It's a nice signing. It's a low risk, high reward, but who knows? I don't know if he just went, I think he chose the Panthers over maybe potentially the Jets and other places, knowing he could be closer to home and, and kind of do some things of that nature. Shaq Thompson obviously has nice moments from time to time. We'll see they lose Frankie Louvu, which I think Louvu was awesome. Last couple of years, A'Shaun Robinson had a couple of years that were really nice. And then, he's just run game. Him and Clowney will be awesome. Did they get in Derek Brown? Like, did they get enough pass rush there? Offensively, oh man, I wasn't super high on Bryce coming out of college, because I just felt like there was a lot that felt like he needed to go right. Like, he's a good athlete. I don't think he's an elite athlete. I don't think he's, has these elite special traits. I think he was really good, and the floor should be quite high. But, there was a lot of issues last year with Bryce. And again, it's a lot on the coaching. I think there's a lot of, things there, and you hope that those kind of get fixed. And we talked about Canales with Baker. Can he get as much out of, Bryce as possible? There's some pieces on the offense that you feel decent about. They bring in Corbett. Obviously, Robert Hunt to the big money deal.
Damian Lewis.
Damian Lewis. Can Icky get back to more of what he was as a rookie? Because he, he's frankly just not. It's been
bad.
Chuba Hubbard, I like it. Moments. Miles Sanders, like, okay, okay. Leggett and Mingo and stuff, and it's like you feel, hey, Leggett was really impressive, but like, is he going to be able to separate enough and do some of the things like that? He's plays bigger than his size actually is. Thielen, I think, is a guy that it's nice to have him in the room, and he's a dependable guy, but his legs.
He shouldn't be the one commanding all the targets like he was last year.
His legs are not what they used to be. And Deontay Johnson, Terrace Marshall, it's like on paper you're like, all right, this group's not anywhere near as bad as it was a year ago. They've gotten better. I think they definitely have upgraded a head coach, or at least offensively. Just still don't think I think their ceilings, like, unless Bryce is awesome, they're probably like a 6-win team at best, and they're probably more like a 4 or 5-win team, which again is a good thing, right? Go from 2 wins to 4 or 5. If you, again, I said this probably for like 5 of the 12 teams we've done so far, but like, because there's so many young quarterbacks, if you leave 2024 as a Panthers fan and say, hey man, like, we feel pretty good about Bryce going forward. A little more talent, a little more time, another year with Canales, he should be really good. We feel good about Canales. We won 5 or 6 games, but we were spunky and like we were in it, in 4 or 5 other games that, luck breaks our way next year. We get a little more talent. We're good. That'd be awesome. I just have worries that like it's really more like a 4 or 5-win team that you don't really feel great about the quarterback, and right. We gave up so much to go get him and all those different types of things. I don't feel great about the Panthers, and not that I was expecting to feel great, but I was expecting to feel a little better than I did. And again, I just come back to like Atlanta feels like their talent versus what you look at on Carolina or even New Orleans.
If you were drafting those two teams, you might go a long ways before. There might not be too many Panthers that would make your starting 22 if you were.
And the one thing I think with Bryce, the last thing on Bryce before we kind of start the wrap here is I felt like last year, we mentioned Josh Allen example, we talked about Drake Maye and these other guys. I didn't feel like, and again, I'm sure Panthers fans will tell me I'm wrong here, but like, didn't feel like there was a lot of moments last year where I was like, oh, holy bleep, like, there it is. I felt like there was a couple, but not enough. And I felt like it was a lot of just like, not a lot of mistakes, not a lot of good plays, it's kind of there. And you just hope, I don't know, under 60% completion, like didn't break 3,000 yards and 16 starts, barely broke double-digit touchdowns, double-digit picks. The most sack yards. It's got to look better, and it's got to be. You got to feel a lot different going into year 3. I just think the expectation is: do we have the coach? Do we have the quarterback? And can our left tackle be our left tackle? If you find at least 2 of those, you're much better spot as a Panthers fan going into 2025.
Yeah, all I could think of quickly on Young was like that year was so bad. It was like a Josh Rosen. If you want to go back, David Carr. If you want to stick to the team, Jimmy Clausen, Clausen was, I don't believe, a first-round pick, might have been second, but it was bad. And there has to be huge signs of growth, or like I said, there has to be consideration to just, I know we spent a ton of capital on this player, but it ain't working. He ain't it. We got to move on. I'll give them credit. You mentioned Lewis and Hunt sort of building huge inside.
Yeah, they're trying.
Because you've got the little quarterback, and this is the New Orleans with Drew Brees, right? This is the Drew's biggest concern was, can I see through the Giants? And what do we got to do? We got to protect him up the middle so that he has throwing lanes, and they invested a crap ton of money in those guys, so hopefully they get the production, and that should, in theory, help Bryce Young take a step forward this year. But like you said, it could be ugly, and Carolina has sort of been twisting in the wind here for several years as they've kind of at the bottom of the food chain here for the entire NFL. All right, that's going to put a wrap on the All 32 pod. Will, always a pleasure. We'll be back next week, where I think we're Wednesday, Friday again next week. We'll see. But then, like I said, as we get into the regular season, we'll settle. It seems like it's going to be a Monday, Friday schedule. We still have not totally firmed that out yet, but we will let you know when we figure it out. As always, thank you for watching and listening wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you watch your podcasts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave the reviews. We need some more reviews. So we got to get some more advertising dollars in this thing and let this thing take off the way Will and I want it to, the way we feel like it can. We like working with each other, and we hope you guys can see that as we go through this process here. So thank you as always, and we'll see you soon.